Sustainable You is a casual, interactive, yet informative series detailing and cataloging sustainability experience. Moreover, this is a short podcast docuseries detailing the thoughts and experiences of passionate advocates towards all things eco-friendly. Our journey is to know how and why understanding sustainable development towards the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet can contribute to a more mindful, holistic, and inclusive world. Specifically, this podcast showcases what makes you a changemaker, innovator, and transformer as you tackle sustainability challenges for current and future generations to resolve the so-called wicked problems. Sled Island is a multi-venue music and arts festival taking place in Calgary, Alberta at the onset of summer each June. The Sled Island Music and Arts Festival is an annual independent music festival ongoing since 2007 and showcases at least 300 bands, visual artists, filmmakers, and comedians with over 40,000 plus attendees in multiple venues. As a festival, it showcases a whole gambit of music catering to any specific genre. For today's episode, I sat down for a chat with Maud Salvi, the director of the Sled Island Music Festival, in which we learn more about their sustainable initiatives. Kind of introduce yourself, tell us your name and what your role and what you do.
My name is Maud Salvi, and I'm the executive and artistic director of the Sled Island Music and Arts Festival in Calgary.
Okay, so we're just gonna do just a really quick icebreaker, if that's cool with you.
Okay.
So if you could choose one adjective, so I'm just gonna send you a list of words, and if you can choose one that kind of best describes your personal persona, I guess. Again, it's just like a fun icebreaker to see kind of, it's not about being type A, personality type A or B, it's just what depicts you best. Just, you can just choose one word.
I could, if I had to pick one, maybe sassy, but it depends on the context, I suppose.
Okay, no worries. And why did you choose that?
I think that there's just a part of my personality that is like my sense of, I feel like, align to some extent with sassiness sometimes.
Okay, interesting. And
Yeah.
that's great. No, that's good. I know it's difficult because you don't really want to typecast yourself, but it's good. It's good to know that sassy would be kind of your word choice. And I guess just going into, before I get into some of the more detailed questions, what makes you uncertain and what makes you curious?
What makes me uncertain about...
I guess like coming in out of COVID, a lot of I guess people have been faced with a lot of growing pains and uncertainty sort of thing. And so I guess is there anything that makes you uncertain?
I want to say so many things makes me uncertain. I feel like we'll live in a, the world is the most volatile, I want to say, that it's been maybe in my lifetime. It feels like every day, every minute, we're on the brink of a possible crisis. So, yeah, I feel that the future is extremely uncertain for a vast array of reasons. I find it very difficult to predict anything anymore.
Okay, cool. And is there anything that makes you curious?
Everything. I'm a very curious person, and I like to think that Sled Island as a festival really celebrates and encourages curiosity. I love learning, not just academic learning, but understanding how things work, learning about people and how, other people think and express themselves and feel. I don't know. I feel like curiosity is the drive for everything for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for answering those kind of intro questions just to get to know you a little bit better when it asks those. I guess now going more into the technical questions. So I guess tell me a bit more about you, your struggles, your aspirations, which kind of led you to be involved in the Sled Island Arts Music Festival. Why did you kind of get into this?
Well, I've always had a strong interest in music from a pretty young age. When I was a teenager, I was volunteering at a music venue and at various music festivals for some years. I was a volunteer contributor to like various music websites or publications, so was very embedded in the music community. And I was lucky enough that I have managed to make it my profession. So I've been working in the music industry, not necessarily just festival, but yeah, in and around the music sector for almost 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And yeah, I would say maybe 15 of that on the festival and specifically nonprofit festival aspect of it, which I think the nonprofit aspect was really my niche in all of that. I like the combination of both, like music as an art form, obviously I love it, but I love the nonprofit community aspect and everything it can do on a more social level. So yeah, I got a first job at a festival about 15 years ago, which allowed me to really understand how large scale event works, what all of the funding that is required, where you can go get it, and then how you implement something that requires a ton of manpower and resources. And so, yeah, I did that for 4 years, learning a ton, and then left that position. And shortly thereafter, the job to be Sled Island Executive Director was posted. And it seemed like the perfect opportunity for me. It was kind of like the next step up. Yeah, so I applied and I got the job.
Okay, great. And how long have you been involved with Sled Island?
Almost 12 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's a very long time.
Yeah. So you've been there since its inception, basically?
No, because it started in 2007.
Oh,
And I only joined in 2013.
okay. Okay. Still, it's like...
But a good chunk of its life, for sure.
Okay, great. And so what do you find are like your most important personal satisfactions and dissatisfactions connected with the musical festival sector? What part of like this role that you're in do you find, what you're satisfied with? What do you find most challenging? What do you not really like about the industry?
I mean, the most satisfying aspect is when the event actually happens and just witnessing the joy of people, not just the joy that they have watching performances, but also enjoying this experience with other people. I think that's really like where the magic happens. You can watch the most amazing concert on your own, but I feel like if you're able to share that with a room full of people who are somewhat like-minded and came with the same intention, they really create experiences that are unique and that people tend to remember. And so that's what makes me proud. That's what I love seeing unfold. And then the other aspect is like seeing artists grow and like really fully realize themselves on stage. Because with Sled Island, because we work with so many emerging artists, it's not uncommon that, we start collaborating with artists when they're very, very early in their career. And then like some of them have played the festival for so many years now that we've really like seen them evolve and playing from like smaller stages to sometimes like ending up in like much larger venues, and that's a really fulfilling part of the job to see that we're able to support their career growth and development.
Okay, yeah, great. No, it's really insightful. And what motivates you to keep, I guess, pursuing this field, or I guess first in Sled Island music festivals?
Well, I feel like, again, as I was saying in answering your previous question, I think that we live through a very difficult time, and there's a lot of division in general. And so I think that we need arts and cultural experience that bring people together really more than ever. We also live in such a capitalistic society that art, at least, you know, obviously that there is art that is being sold and commercialized, but just the idea that creating art can exist outside of this capitalist money-led realm, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's actually a good segue into the sustainable development aspect of things, because I find a lot of, like, you know, music festivals here or events in general, they operate in silos, and there's not enough that they're doing for sustainable development. And there's so much potential when you see examples from around the world for music events. So I guess the first question, now going more into sustainability. So what would be your personal definition of sustainable development?
Just my definition of sustainable development. Yeah, I would say development that is conscious and mindful of the fact that resources are not endless, and that we have to make sure that whatever we create, whatever we produce, or in that case, whatever we organize, is respectful of the environment in which it exists, but also contributes to it, as opposed to just take from it and extract from it. But yeah, when I think of sustainable development, I obviously think about like the environment, but I think it's hard for me to think about that without thinking about all the rest, because all of this, everything is connected, right? I mean, we know that like sustainable, like there are links between a lot of other issues that are more social in nature, but that ends up being connected to environmental issues. Like none of these various aspects of sustainability exist in a vacuum. Like they're all kind of influence each other. So I think to be a truly sustainable event, or like growing any project in a sustainable manner, you have to think of the way you work with all kind of resources, not just, you know, non-renewable resources from the earth, but also you have to think of people as resources, and like how can you work with people in a way that they're going to want to be there and are going to be able to be there for the long haul, and making sure that everyone has the resources at their disposal to thrive and not just to survive.
Oh, no, that's a good thing. I like long answers. I mean, no, I think, yeah, it's a matter of, I guess, making it more inclusive, like you said. It's not just, I guess, that 70s version of being just an environmentalist or an activist.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually a very valid point. And did like Sled Island itself, like, is there a basic philosophy of this like, I guess this company, or like of Sled Island, like when it started out? Because I know I'd interviewed you a couple times before, but did you start with the intention that we'll have like green initiatives, like, you know, the bike racks and the compostable, you know, food packaging and stuff like that? Or
yeah, it is definitely a big part of our values, with the caveat that because our festival primarily takes place in venues and spaces that are not ours, there are a lot of things that we don't control, specifically speaking there in terms of like environmental practices. But whenever we do control things and have a say in them, we certainly try again, to be whatever we do, to do it in a way that it's going to nurture our community as opposed to, leave negative effects behind.
Okay, yeah, no, great. And do you, like, from your perspective, now that you've been with Sled Island for over a decade now, have you seen like kind of problems in this field when it comes to like, you know, all these like festivals around the world, for example, are aiming to go carbon neutral or, you know, advocating for net zero waste? Have you like seen, like, I'm sure you've seen these problems over the years, and I guess like how are you responding to it right now at the moment?
If I'm being perfectly honest, I feel like even though there has been a lot of progress, and certainly being environmentally conscious has become way more commonplace in the organization of festivals, there is also such an insane financial pressure on festivals right now across the board, not just music, but also not just in Canada. Like, we see literally every single day, I hear about one or two major festival saying they have to, to shut down. And the reality is that a lot of the things that you should be doing to minimize your impact on the environment, well, they cost a lot of money. That's just the sad truth. Whether it's things like when you buy your office supplies, like, the eco-conscious version of whatever product you're buying is very usually like quite a bit more expensive. Or like, I don't know, like, I don't know how people say that they're aiming to be carbon neutral, especially knowing that well, at least maybe not so much for local festival, but I mean, if you're a festival that works with international artists, travel is obviously a huge source of emission. And especially in a country as vast and sparsely populated as Canada, there isn't much that you can do about that unless really making a principled decision that you want your event to be only local and only feature like local artists and not try to attract people from the outside. But which, it's totally valid if that's what your event is, but that's not exactly what we're doing. So I don't want to sugarcoat it because I don't know how to reconcile those two realities. I think that in terms of like, I'm trying to think of usual other things that would contribute to like emissions, or like, I feel like for outdoor festival, it is a lot of like food packaging or like maybe like water bottle, plastic water bottle, or like cups and all of that. Because we're primarily indoors, we're pretty good on that side because usually venues will use actual glassware. When they serve food, they have actual dish. All reusable stuff, so it's not too bad, but it's really like the travel to bring the artist and like from the people coming from out of town for it. I just don't know how we, unless we start having planes that fly on biofuel, which is definitely not, there's nothing that we at our small level can do about that. Yeah, I don't really know how to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It almost feels like sustainable in general is a paradox. Like, you can't, and I know people out there, advocates that are aiming for degrowth, but that's really tricky when it comes to things like event planning. Like, I guess, adopt that mindset, and it's not necessarily always practical, like you said. So how do you personally view sustainability, especially in the context of the music industry and sustainable consumption? You talked a bit about it. And is your perspective on this similar to what Sled Island's perspective would be on sustainability?
I think so. I think they're pretty. And I'm not saying that there's nothing that can be done in the music industry. There are obviously small things here and there, and small things collectively add up to a lot. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of examples. we give away kind of like swag bags to all of our artists during the festival. Well, it's been a long time now that we've banned like any kind of like pamphlet or like paper product that partners would want to put in those bags, because usually, people will grab the bag and go through it, and we'll only keep what is worth keeping and discard whatever paper in there. So small things like that, we really try to not waste. For instance, when we receive like, in-kind donations from sponsors, like last year we had a deodorant brand who was one of our sponsors, and they sent us like thousands of deodorant to distribute, and we were left after the festival with a box of about like 150. So we asked them if they were cool with us donating it to Good Neighbors, which is a local organization that it's like a pay what you can thrift store, and they with a lot of vulnerable population to like give them like basic products and stuff like that. So, trying to see where we can do good with what we do have and trying to limit what end up in the landfill. But yeah, that's sometimes it feels like it's a small drop in the bigger issue. And then you pointed out the bikes earlier. I mean, I'm sure it does make a bit of a difference during the week of the festival, because we really strongly encourage people to bike to the festival and leave their car at home. So we know, just based on, the numbers from the various cycle tracks, they have counters that count how many bikes go through. And we know that there's always a big surge during the week of the festival, which is nice to see that it does have some impact. But then, I can't help but think that at this scale, if you look at an entire year, and also the number of people who come to Sled Island versus like even the entire population of the city, it's hard sometimes to not feel like you're such a small cog in such a bigger system that wasn't designed to foster sustainability.
Right. Okay. No, that's actually a really good point. And do you want to share a bit more about Sled Island's, I guess, their business model, kind of like the strategies that you use, and how do you think it's different from like the traditional music festival that don't even bother with the sustainable approach, like the Stampede, for example? And for the campus paper, we always write these rebuttal pieces. Even though the Stampede technically isn't just like a music festival, people would say, oh, well, the animal husbandry and there's like animal, abuse going on, and it's such a, they're not really doing anything for sustainability, not really. So it's kind of like Sled Island's kind of like the alternative in a way. So do you want to talk a bit more about like, I guess, your strategies, your sustainability approach that you're doing, or maybe that you'll implement sometime later?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously when you compare a for-profit company and a non-profit publicly funded organization, their motivations are going to be drastically different. So an event like the Calgary Stampede, I mean, large motivation for that event to happen is money, right? And I mean, and I don't say that only in a negative way, just because I know that if the Stampede wasn't around, like it would like so drastically impact Calgary and Alberta's economic situation, that I'm not necessarily saying that we would be better off without it. But certainly when you go to the event, it is the epicenter of consumption, right? You're like being pushed to spend your money and like buy things, and you see like the garbage bins filled with like cups and like packaging and all of that. And the sheer volume is like so huge that, yeah, I don't think that you can have that type of event without it having a pretty significant negative impact on the the site or the environment where it takes place. I think that the way we try to address that is, again, I want to be very mindful of like, we definitely don't do as much as we technically could, but that's because a lot of the things we can't afford to do. Like I was saying, like, buying supplies are more eco-conscious or that kind of stuff. But I think that being an event that really promotes local first, like whether it's in our programming, we have a lot of local artists that we support by giving them opportunities to reach large audiences, but we also, because we bring people to the city, we also support local businesses and the local economy. So again, that's a different kind of sustainability, but I think that's where we actually would have the most impact. And then let's see, I think that promoting volunteerism, like with the festival, we I shouldn't use that word, but the festival is made possible by about 300 volunteers each year, which is amazing that we can get that many people. But I think people who volunteer also get a lot out of it, because it really helps with people meeting other like-minded individuals and like building relationships. And I think that makes communities stronger and more resilient, which in a much longer term is, I think, an aspect of, again, a city sustainable growth. So yeah, I think our philosophy is just to be mindful of how we do things. And one thing that I find myself saying quite frequently when we discuss potential project is, because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. Sometimes we might get an opportunity and it might seem like in the short term it's like, it's an influx of money and it might seem like a good idea, but once you really start to ponder, does that fit with our value? Does this actually like fit our mandate? Then sometimes we might just decide that actually, no, we don't think that we should do things for the sake of doing things or because there is like money attached to it. Yeah. I think just being mindful of how you do things, why you do them, and always like work with people and try to involve the community in as many aspects of the festival as we can. Yeah. And deliver it in a way that is respectful of it and that is, brings something to it, I think is the main difference. Whereas usually for-profit festival, well, they're a business, right? They're a way to make money. The whole goal is to make money. So obviously they're going to have very different motivations and considerations.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting that you mentioned mindfulness, and I think that's a valid point. Like, I didn't realize, you are like a nonprofit business model, and I think there's so much potential for that when it comes to like social entrepreneurship and getting local musicians and artists into that. So I think that's really interesting. And like when it comes to your green initiatives, like I find you've made pretty good strides, but is there like a great achievement like for your green initiatives you find that you've championed really well or you hope to do?
Well, again, I think the whole biking, the way we've been championing bikes and biking infrastructure since the beginning of the festival actually has had a really big impact on the city's policy when it comes to bikes. I can give you a few examples, but before Calgary had an actual cycle tracks with, like really delimit, like bike lanes that were physically separated from the road and all of that. The city of Calgary asked us to do kind of like a pilot bike lane in a certain area of downtown during one edition of the festival to see, if the location would work, if it would actually alleviate traffic flows, that kind of stuff. So because the city knew that so many people already biked during Sled Island, they thought it was a good idea to test it out during the festival. And then, later on, when then they launched the actual city cycle track, they timed it so that it was launched like just the week before Sled Island, because I think they knew that the numbers, as I was saying, there's those counters on each cycle track, and I think they knew that by launching it around the time of the festival, the numbers were going to be pretty good out of the gates. But also there's things like, so each year we take it upon ourselves to like rent bike racks, and we have a team who install them in front of our busiest venues. While over the years, we've seen some of those temporary bike racks then become permanent bike racks, either because the city saw that there was a need there and then they created one, or sometimes it's like even the venues themselves, like private businesses, are just seeing how well they're being used during Sled Island, who decided to like just build some. So I think really on biking, the impact that we've had is quite significant and has contributed to support the development of the bicycle network in Calgary, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, yeah, because it's not like, when you go to places abroad, like where I was living in Sweden, it's just really innate, like the biking culture. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, even with the bike lanes, I find that you don't necessarily always feel safe because you've seen Calgary drive. Yep. It's just, yeah, and then I've worked in traffic news, so I always feel like paranoid almost biking here, but if you're always like, but it's nice because like once a year when Sled Island comes, everyone's on the same page. They're going to be on board doing that. So you're right, it does really kind of promote that aspect. And just for the next question, so do you find that, and you mentioned these a little bit before, but are there specific obstacles working towards scaling a sustainable event, such as Sled Island, and what have been your difficulties considering how you've grown over the years? And yeah.
The number one difficulty, I think, for all festival organizers is money. It costs so much money to put on a large scale event, and those costs have been growing way over even faster than the regular inflation rate at a time where most people are really feeling like the strain on their own like disposable income. So it's not as simple as everything costs more money, therefore we can raise the ticket prices accordingly and people will continue coming. It's actually the opposite. While our expenses are going up and up, we see, every year after the festival, we do a survey with the people who came. And this year in particular, the concerns around financial accessibility for recreational events was like higher than any time before. So how do you reconcile everything costing more? And, there's also this, I think is a good thing, but like, especially it started during the pandemic, but I find that artists are getting more and more vocal about how people actually valuing their work appropriately and compensating them better and more appropriately for what they create, because there's this tendency of seeing art as something that we don't need to pay for. So there's also across the board, like, I want to say pressure, but not necessarily in a negative way, but like you can't get away with like paying people as low as you would have a number of years ago. And I think it's great in the grand scheme of things, but again, when you're on the producing end of a big event, it's just more money again that you have to find somehow, while at the same time the people that come to your events have less and less money that they can contribute. So it's I think about money way more than I think about anything else doing my job. on the day to day. But then there are also things that are more like linked to like our local context, if I can say. So for instance, it's a major hurdle for us that Calgary has such terrible public transport because it really limits who can come to the festival, because all of our venues are concentrated downtown. But yes, there's the C train, but it doesn't go everywhere. And also it only run until maybe like 11:30 p.m. at most midnight, but a lot of our events, especially on the weekend, go up until 2 a.m. And so, which means that, well, people either can't stay until the end or decide that, you know, it's not worth coming at all, which I totally understand. Or even if people who live further away and have a car, like parking downtown is such a headache that, yeah, that's also a deterrent. And then I guess just the city's urban planning, again, is really not conducive. The sprawl is such an obstacle to, you know, marketing an event in a city that is as sprawly as Calgary. Like, there's no way you can reach every single community, especially in the suburb. It's just, when people live like a full, almost hour drive away from where your event takes place, it's really hard to get their attention, right? And I think that's why, even though the festival has been around since 2007, there are still so many people who have never heard of it because they never really spend time downtown, either because they don't want to or don't have to. But I'm pretty sure that often it's because it is so inconvenient to just get there. And that, unfortunately, are things that, you know, we have absolutely no control over. Like, we've tried to talk to the city about the transit piece specifically, and asking them if there's any way that, you know, during Sled Island, or at least like on the Friday and Saturday, transit could run later. But they say that we don't bring enough people that we would make it worthwhile for them financially to run transit for an additional hour. So yeah, I would say money is number one, but then there's just like environmental factor that are out of your control and that you have to exist within.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize so much goes into planning a music, especially a sustainable music festival, if you're aiming for that, because you know, like you said, like you have to find the funding and then work with the local artists and musicians, and like, you know, transportation and public transport is not necessarily, they might not cater to you. And actually, I wanted to kind of go a bit more into that, a question about your stakeholders. So it seems like a lot, you have to appease to a lot of different parties and people that are involved in this. So how do you effectively communicate your maybe sustainable initiatives with these stakeholders? Like, are they usually on board? Are they like turned off by it? Because I know we had the single use, I don't know if you're familiar, I'm sure you are, the single use plastics ban. I remember breaking that news story. So there's this single use plastics ban, as you know, in Canada a couple of years ago, and then it was overturned. Yeah. So that didn't work out. And I remember at the time when I broke that news story, a lot of small business owners or even vendors, they were complaining that it would up the costs, and there's already inflation.
People have their own economic reality. And so while they're generally very, do things in the most environmentally friendly way in terms of like suppliers or, so, you know, we try to do the least bad option. Yeah. Within what we can afford. I mean, it's sad to say, but it's true. Like, you know, we will look at like quotes and the difference. Like, I give you an example. Last year we had a conversation about like our volunteer t-shirts. So as I say, we have about like 300 volunteers. So it's a lot of t-shirts to have made. And we were approached producing the t-shirts for us, and because it's all like locally made and sourced and blah blah blah. but ultimately the price differences was such with like, you know, the supplier that we usually use that we just simply like we just couldn't make it work. As much as I would have loved to support a local business, it's such as the price difference is just so drastic. And our margin is like so thin. We really, in cases like that, unfortunately, like we can't really go for like the objectively better option.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And do you, like, just on that, like, is there any non-negotiable, I guess, eco-friendly principle you're going to uphold regardless of your financial situation with the festival or and whatnot?
Well, what I mentioned, you know, we don't like, with all of we have like so many different partners. We don't let people like just like distribute like paper, like flyers or anything that can be easily discarded. Like we don't allow that. Usually if partners want to distribute something during the festival, we really encourage them to do like promotional objects, things that people are actually like going to keep, whether it's like, you know, a keychain, a pair of sunglasses, or just like things that people are going to actually hold on to because they have a use and a value, as opposed to just like purely like, promotional paper. So that's something that we've always stuck with. When we do, we have very few outdoor events anymore, but when we do have outdoor events and we need food trucks, we do make it mandatory that the food trucks use compostable utensils and foodware. And when we do events where we run the bar, like sell the beverages, we don't sell plastic water in plastic bottles. So these are things that we've been able to like stick with.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, no, for me, I became fascinated, like we see examples, but it's good to know that you're still making headway somehow on these. And my next question is, do you have, because I know you said for Sled Island you don't really have a formalized way of measuring things like social or environmental impact. I'm sure I'm likely, like I didn't see any like annual sustainability report or anything like that, but do you hope to do something like that? Like, do you want to start having some sort of metrics or data like towards a sustainability strategy in the future?
We were part of like some kind of program maybe a year ago. That was like an online platform that did help you quantify your environmental footprint. So it was based both on like our office and the use of it and like our staff practices in terms of like transport to and from the office and that kind of thing. But then also like the actual footprint of the event at large. And like I mentioned earlier, and that's exactly what I expected, like the bulk of our environmental impact is the flights for artists, and it's pretty significant, but there's just nothing we can do about it. So I don't, like I feel like measuring things when you know that you can address them is one thing, but that's really something that is just so much bigger than us.
Mm-hmm. No, that's valid. I guess just on that, okay. No, I guess you answered that question. I guess like just when you're reading about Sled Island, it would seem like you mentioned your green initiatives like biking, reusable water bottles, working with vendors for compostable cutlery and whatnot is very important. So like is like social environmental protection for like the Calgary community, is it vital? Like is that like, would you say one of your core values? Is it something that's really important?
Again, for like sustainability outside of just environmental, yes, but I don't think I can at the same time tell you that I think that environmental sustainability is like a core value of ours, and in the same breath acknowledging that we know that like the emissions from the travel from the artists we bring are like pretty significant. I think it would be like dishonest of me. So I think I wouldn't, like, we didn't, you know, as a nonprofit organization, we have a written mandate, and our written mandate is not about environmental sustainability. Mm-hmm. Yes, we try to incorporate sustainable practices when we can, but we're not an environmental organization. That's not our primary focus. So while obviously at a personal level, you know, I know that the earth is burning and that we absolutely need to do something, environmentally speaking. And yes, it's supremely important, but there are organizations in the world and companies who like, that's what they work on. That's their main line of work, and that's not ours. Which I don't mean to say by that then we can like wash our hands and like don't care about it at all. No, we do. But again, you know, we operate in a very complicated and precarious economic environment. And so we just can't do very much on that level.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Do you find that there is potential though, like, because you said you work with local artists, like collaborating with these, I guess, citizen activists, such as like, you know, Fridays for Future, if you heard about them, or Extinction Rebellion, all these like environmental activism kind of things going on here locally, just kind of collaborating with them. Do you think there's potential for that, to move it more in that direction? Like, would you want, like, aim for something like that?
So, like, give me an example of things that they would do.
It's a good point. I mean, like, somehow I'm thinking how they could tie, like, their activist protests, like something like Extinction Rebellion, how they could tie it to maybe like a music act somehow. Like, I think there's potential for it. I'm just not sure in what way.
I think there's potential, but like at the end of the day, if there's no political will, then the money is never going to trickle down to supporting those kind of initiative. Like, I can tell you that if there was like a government or a funding body that tomorrow was like, hey, we're giving out those grants so that you can buy more sustainably made volunteer t-shirts, and you can, you know, buy recyclable paper for all your printing needs throughout the year, of course we would do it. And I'm pretty sure that like probably the vast majority of nonprofits would like jump at the opportunity. But in the absence of those things, and in a world where again all those things cost more money and we have less and less money, mm-hmm. You know, I think it's just very difficult to reconcile. But anyway, I think that, and I told you that before we did the interview, I feel like question of environmental sustainability are more relevant for outdoor festivals mm-hmm. than they are for us. I'm not saying like we don't have our own impact, but like the impact is much, much greater when like your festival takes place directly in a natural habitat. an environment. So I think we're a bit of a different case, I suppose.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations for like these outdoor music festivals? Like, how would you minimize the impact like event planning for music festivals has on the local community in terms of like everything, like pollution and like noise, not just like noise pollution, but like all sorts of different types of like pollution, I guess. Do you have any like thoughts on
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not the most informed in terms of best practices because that's not what we do. But, you know, I anecdotally know that a lot of festivals do a really great job with like things from like, you know, using like reusable cups or like plates or cutlery where people like there's a deposit, but then you get your deposit back when you return those things so that they don't have to buy plastic or disposable, like one-time use. So that's obviously a very big one. I would say that when people choose an outdoor site, they should, of course, be like mindful of like, I don't know, whatever natural habitat it might be, whether it's like for animals or like plants or whatever. I'm sure there's like a lot of other things, but again, knowing it's not really what we do, that's not my area of expertise.
Okay, no worries. And like I guess this just a few more questions here. I just want to go a bit more into like consumer relationship and who your your followers are. So what's your relationship, you would say, at the moment with your consumers, and do you find that it differs from other like typical like maybe other music festivals in Canada? Like why would someone want to choose Sled Island to attend Sled Island?
I think they were lucky that we have a very loyal audience. There are many people among our attendees that have been coming since the very beginning, so for the past like 17 years. And I think it is because they see that we do care, and in the way that we put on our event, that we prioritize the community, that they know that like we treat artists, like we may not be able to pay artists the best, especially compared to for-profit festival, but we do treat them very well. You know, our volunteers, I think the environment and the atmosphere that we've been able to create, I think speaks for itself, and people are usually pretty seduced by it and want to come back and experience it again. So I think it's way more, it goes beyond a simple like transactional relationship, right? And in particular, more and more, we're actually having to ask our audience to donate to the festival in addition or outside of like purely like buying their tickets, because box office revenue, like tickets and pass sales, that only covers like maybe like at most a third of our expenses, between 25 to 30% depending on the year, meaning like there's like 70% that we have to find somewhere else. And as rents dwindle and sponsorship is harder and harder to come by, like we have to do more and more direct fundraising. And so seeing that there are people in our community who are willing to donate money in addition to already like, paying to come to the event just because they think it's an important thing for the city and that they just want to see it continue, even sometimes when they themselves can't really attend as much as they used to, either because, they're older, they have a family and whatnot, but they still wanted to be around for like younger generation. So those things makes me feel like yeah, we do actually have a relationship with our audience. And it's not just we're selling them something and they're paying us and then we leave it at that.
Okay. No, that's nice. That's not just about another, like mindless entertainment and hyperconsumption, that you're actually, like you said, fostering a relationship. Do you find that your your commitment and Sled Island's commitment to sustainability impacts how consumers shop with you, like where their shopping choices and like their experiences? Because I know you said you sell like swag and whatnot, like you sell your own merchandise. Like have you thought about selling more, I guess, sustainability sourced products? I don't know if you do that.
I mean, this end up being the exact same issue that, like, if it's sustainably sourced, it's going to cost way more. Therefore, we're going to have to sell it for way more. And then knowing again that people have, limited means right now, only a really select few can afford to pay premium for the price of like being more eco-conscious.
Yeah, no.
So
I understand. Like I totally understand, because I did my thesis on sustainable fashion, and again, it's better abroad. Again, in the EU with their stricter regulations for like these like label like the certifications, but you are paying a premium. Like sustainable garments are like a luxury markup, like you said.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
So it's it was eye opening for me. Like, why isn't everybody? But it's no, I totally understand where you're coming from. Do you find that Sled Islands, I would say you're pretty you have a pretty authentic relationship with your consumers, but do you find that Sled Islands transparency and accountability affects your relationship with your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people really value and appreciate transparency because, when they know how the money is being used, well, then they usually like feel better potentially about supporting your cause. And so being able to speak to the impact of what you do, I think it's very important, but also, how you use your resources and what you prioritize with the money that you do have. Or like even transparency in terms of like processes or, how the artists are selected and like why we choose to do this over that. I think that the more transparency and insight you can give people into how you make your decisions, allow them to like feel closer to the organization and more aligned, which usually results in like a stronger relationship, especially in the long term.
Right. And do you find that like over, I guess, the years that you've been with Sled Island, that you've seen consumers' expectations change and demand for everything, not just like sustainability, maybe like the type of music, like a little bit of everything? Like, has it affected how you operate the festival?
It's more like not so much what they want that change, but like there's definitely like consumption habits that tend to change. Like, when I started working for the festival, back then we sold way more like full festival passes. And over the years, like we see like more and more like people just want to be able to customize every single thing. So it's more like individual tickets because they want to pick and choose what they want to go to as opposed to buying for the full thing. People just buy way later as well. I think that's like, especially post-COVID, so many people got burned buying tickets for things that then they never got refunds for, that now there's a lot of skepticism and people tend to really buy at the last minute. So things like that, yes, I notice. But also it is true that like, I would say, especially with younger demographics, they're more exigent. Like they ask for more in terms of upholding certain values, which I think is great. But then, we also have sometimes to have those conversations with our audience, the same conversation I just had with you. Like, it's great to have strong values, but also you have to be realistic. And because most people have absolutely no idea how much money it costs to put on a festival, or even just to bring a band to Calgary. Like, people are completely clueless. And usually when you start like giving them numbers of what things cost, then they become much more understanding about why you don't do things a certain way, or, you know. So yeah, even for that type of discussion, transparency really helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very insightful. And just to step away from that, you mentioned COVID, because I remember the last couple of times when I interviewed you, we were in the thick of like the pandemic. So I'm curious, like since then, like I know a lot of businesses didn't emerge unscathed. It's just being in another part of the world, being in Sweden, when I realized they were kind of a bit of the outliers. They didn't have the masks. Vaccines are mandatory. So it seems like when you go to Stockholm, you know, like their festivals are like go out without a hitch. Whereas in Alberta and Canada in general, I guess North America in general is a different story. Do you find that like the COVID altered the trajectory of Sled Island? Like, have you been prospering coming out of it, or struggling? Like, how has it been?
Oh, we've been pretty lucky. I mean, if, you know, just in terms of like people wanted to come back, I wouldn't say that we've seen, like, I know some organizations say that they still struggle to get their audience fully back post-COVID. For us, it was like a pretty quick bounce back. But that being said, though, the world has changed so tremendously, and like economics have changed so tremendously for everybody, that even people who still want to support you, the big difference is that nowadays they may not be able to, just because like putting food on the table is already hard enough. And obviously like leisure spending, like music festival, is never like in the top priorities, and understandably so. And then I think maybe the biggest impact that we've seen is probably on like sponsorship, because businesses were really so impacted by COVID that a lot of them are still recovering from those years. And well, same thing for businesses, you know, when times are tough, and they look at their budget, the first thing that is going to get cut, if there isn't enough money, is sponsorship. So yeah, it's just the pool of sponsorship money is smaller and smaller, and there are more and more people going after it. So we're certainly feeling the pressure in that aspect. But in terms of overall like community support and people still being interested in what we're offering, I think there's still like a strong local support and rally behind Sled Island.
Okay, great. Just last couple questions here. Sorry, I know it went on longer. If you don't mind. So the next question is, what kind of, I guess, attributes and characteristics do you believe contribute most to success, if it is doable and possible, for sustainable development in the music industry, especially when it comes to putting on these events?
I think just putting people first in the way you work and everything that you do. So like, whether it's like your staff, your volunteer, your artists, making sure that people are taken care of first, and then the rest usually will follow, I want to say. And just being like, yeah, transparent. Transparency, I think, is very, very important. Both so that you are accountable to people, but also so that people are aware of what you stand for. I know that a few years ago, we made like a conscious effort to be more vocal about what our values are, because I think we were operating under this assumption that people who come to the festival obviously know what we're about, because we assumed they could tell from like just, being at the event and the vibe and the type of people who come. But then, during COVID, we had kind of a lot of time for reflection and conversations and like, things like talking with maybe, artists from various like racial background, and them telling us how important it was for us to see the word anti-racism used on our website, and us clearly stating that we strive to be an anti-racist organization, and that being so public and information and something that we put forward willingly, that they automatically like felt more inclined to look into Sled Island and want to participate, which is something that we hadn't really thought about as much prior. So yeah, I think being intentional and transparent about your values and what you're trying to achieve through your work is very important to success.
Okay, great. No, I didn't know that. It's pretty insightful. And just going off of that, do you have any sage advice for others that want to put on things like a sustainable music festival? Like how does a brand become more holistic and inclusive if they want to make those like ethical business choices?
Well, you just have to put in the work and not just pay lip service to a lot of things. And often like implementing meaningful change is a long process. It's not something that you can do just like that. So if you're truthful about your willingness to include more people, then you have to be ready to like commit to building those relationships in the long term. And nothing is going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time, and there's going to be like a lot of trial and failure on the road to that. But yeah, I don't know, still continuing trying, I think, is important, even when you mess up. And yeah.
No, that's really good. And then just to wrap up our episode today, do you I guess, what is your future vision for Sled Island? Do you have any personal thoughts on that?
It's hard to tell right now. We're really in it's kind of full circle with how we started this conversation. Uncertainty is so huge at all levels that it's actually hard to have a vision for the future, because I truly don't know what the future holds. Not just for Sled Island, but I honestly question the future of live music, period. Again, with all this festival going bankrupt, artists, even like really established international artists that keep coming out with statement about how they can no longer afford to tour, even though, they play in like pretty big venues, because it is costing them too much. But at the same time, event organizers also like just can't reconcile like how to run an event financially viable event. So I really just genuinely wonder if live music is going to be around for that much longer, at least unless there's other drastic things that change in our society and your economic context. But like currently, it's actually not really looking good. And I'm sorry if you were hoping for something more positive.
No, I like that. No, I like that you're being raw about it. You're being like honest. So that's good. And that's what I want. I don't want the corporate news, happy-go-lucky portrayal of it. This is part of the reason why I'm doing this, because I feel like people are like, they don't really want to think outside the box necessarily. If you're just kind of sticking to the basics. And I think it's good to kind of you're addressing that, and that's what I want to hear more of, like what the struggles are and behind that. But I would love if, if something like the Flow Festival, I'm sure, like if even with Sled Island, I see potential for making it more of an interactive arts festival, because I've attended it before, and if you can somehow combine art and design and entrepreneurship, I think that there's potential there. Do you have any final thoughts? Maybe I haven't touched on the topic. Maybe, hopefully I covered everything.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to yet another eye-opening episode of Sustainable You. Again, this is an extraordinary and engaging info series whose purpose is to make sustainable development and sustainability accessible to the average person in their quest to quench their knowledge on environmentalism. Be sure to leave your feedback by liking this week's released edition and by subscribing to this podcast. Again, any love from our followers is much appreciated. Signing off until next time.